get started.
Alright, so I'm January, and I go to the Rocky Mountain School of Expeditionary Learning, and this is Libby and Huey, and we all met at the... Yes. And so would you be able to give us a brief summary of who you are, like what you do, where you were born, when you were born, etc.?
All right, I was born in Seattle, Washington in September 2331. I am a fraternal twin, and she lives in Denver.
Oh.
And we lived in, my parents were divorced when we were 2, so we lived in foster homes and orphanage. So we moved quite a bit until the war started. I was 10 at the time, and when the executive order 9066 was publicized, that's when my dad decided that to move to a camp, we should be together. So that's when we started living with my dad for those few months before we left for camp.
Did you live with your sister the whole time?
We were, thank goodness, we
Yeah.
were always together. Wherever they put us, we were always together.
Awesome.
Was that something that they tried to do? Did they try to keep families together, or were they not too concerned with that when they were putting
No,
people in
I
camps?
think they probably thought about that. But we didn't know, of course.
Mhm.
So to make sure that we were together, that's when we moved back with my dad and his dad.
What camp did you go to?
First, we went to the Assembly Center, which was
yeah.
in Puyallup, Washington. There are 4 camps. I believe I mentioned that before. A, B, C, and D. And we were in the smallest camp, Camp C. And ironically, it was called, all the camps there were called Camp Harmony. Yeah.
Of course.
Yes. So we stayed there a few months until our regular camp, which was Minidoka, Idaho, was completed. And being from Seattle, we weren't used to living with heat. The weather was hot. And the winters in Idaho were really cold there too, but we soon got used to it. But it was quite a change. It was confusing for us as being children. We really didn't know what was going on. We were frightened of the soldiers with their rifles and always standing guard. And when we moved from the Assembly Center to Minidoka, we were put on trains, and we had to keep the shades down. They wouldn't let us open the shades. They kept the shades down. And then, of course, the guards would every now and then would go up the aisle of the trains to make sure of what, where would we go?
Yeah.
But it was dusty. I remember, not comfortable. And then we were from the railroad tracks, we went on buses to the camp, to Camp Minidoka.
What was it like, that transition from like being just a regular American citizen to like being a prisoner in the camps?
Well, for children, I don't think we really understood. All we knew was the sense of foreboding. You know, it was just, the adults were just, well, they were confused too, but they were afraid. They didn't know what was going to happen. And it was just seeing all these negative looks and being harassed. That was new to us as children. And it wasn't anything that was real peaceful. I mean, in Seattle, I know, before we left for camp, the Japanese were actually, some of them were beaten and harassed, and then before our move, the Japanese were restricted from going into downtown Seattle. So we had Chinese friends who would wear these "I am a Chinese American" button.
Mhm.
They used to borrow and let us borrow it. So we'd be able to go downtown to do our shopping. Otherwise, we weren't allowed to go there.
What do you remember about Pearl Harbor?
Oh, what I remember is that Sunday we were sitting on the floor reading the comic strips. The radio was turned on. And I remember the foster parents that we were staying with, when they heard, they couldn't believe it. They kept changing the stations, and each station that they turned on, it was announced that the Japanese, of course, they weren't saying Japanese, but in Guam, Pearl Harbor, and they were just astonished, shocked, and then afraid, what will happen to us? What can we do? But that was the first thought I remember, reading the Sunday papers.
Mm-hmm. Just was your foster family Japanese as well?
Mhm, mhm,
Ah.
mhm. The only one that wasn't, we were partially raised by a Caucasian lady. This of course was before the war, Mrs. Butcher, and we were living in the country, and that was the only Caucasian actually that took care of us. And then of course in the orphanage there were Caucasians. Mm-hmm.
What was a strong memory from being in the internment camp?
Well, as a child, it wasn't too bad, because we had playmates that looked like us. We played the usual games, kick the can. And of course, there weren't any trees then to climb. I used to climb a lot of trees when I was living in Seattle. But we enjoyed having so many playmates. And then, of course, we went to school. And so it wasn't that bad. The only thing I remember is there's no privacy when you went to the bathrooms and the restrooms. And then eventually the ladies would use curtains to cover the stalls, you know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
there just weren't, and of course probably harder for the teenagers, than the adults.
Yeah.
But no, there wasn't that much privacy. The first time we entered Minidoka, of course we used the outhouses because the restrooms and the laundry rooms weren't, the plumbing I believe was completed. And so we had to use the outhouse. And the outhouse on our side was at the end of the barracks that we were staying in. And then when the restrooms and laundry rooms were all completed, then they tore that down. And the thing that was so funny to me was this bachelor who lived in the same barracks but in a different room made a vegetable garden right over. and he had corn and potatoes, tomatoes, beans. Well, where he had planted the corn, it was, it was like this, and then all of a sudden you see this an actual square stalks of the corn. Mm-hmm. And then the vegetables next to the corn, the tomatoes were humongous. I never saw tomatoes that huge. And potatoes, oh my goodness. And he was so proud when he was harvesting them and giving it to everybody. And my dad said, "Don't eat it." And so I think a lot of the people in our block didn't. They accepted it with gratitude and all, but I doubt if they ate it either because they knew where it came from. But that was so funny. It was just the stalks, just like that. And the others that weren't that close, were shorter. It was so funny.
What was a strong memory from being in the internment camp?
Well, as a child, it wasn't too bad because we had playmates that looked like us. um, we played the usual games, kick the can. And of course, there weren't any trees then to climb. I used to climb a lot of trees when I was living in Seattle. But we enjoyed having so many playmates. And then, of course, we went to school. And so it wasn't that bad. The only thing I remember is there's no privacy when you went to the bathrooms and the restrooms. And then eventually the ladies would use curtains to cover the stalls, you know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
there just weren't, and of course probably harder for the teenagers, than the
Yeah.
adults. But no, there wasn't that much privacy. The first time we entered Minidoka, of course we used the outhouses because the restrooms and the laundry rooms weren't, the plumbing I believe was completed. And so we had to use the outhouse. And the outhouse on our side was at the end of the barracks that we were staying in. And then when the restrooms and laundry rooms were all completed, then they tore that down. And the thing that was so funny to me was this bachelor who lived in the same barracks but in a different room made a vegetable garden right over. and he had corn and potatoes, tomatoes, beans. Well, where he had planted the corn, it was, it was like this, and then all of a sudden you see this an actual square stalks of the corn. Mm-hmm. And then the vegetables next to the corn, the tomatoes were humongous. I never saw tomatoes that huge. And potatoes, oh my goodness. And he was so proud when he was harvesting it and giving it to everybody. And my dad said, "Don't eat it." And so I think a lot of the people in our block didn't. They accepted it with gratitude and all, but I doubt if they ate it either because they knew where it came from. But that was so funny. It was just the stalks, just like that. And the others that weren't that close, were shorter. It was so funny.
What was the community like in the camp?
Well, in our block, we had, there was a gentleman that was elected, I wouldn't call him mayor of our block, but he was the leader. And then my dad was the storekeeper for the mess hall. He's the one that ordered all the food that the cooks would prepare. And then, of course, all the detergents and things like that and dishes if we needed more dishes. But he would do that. And then there were one or two gentlemen who used to manage the heating elements for the laundry room. They had to stay there in this room.
Oh,
it was like an H shape. One side was the laundry room. The other side was the restrooms and the shower and the bathtubs. And then right in the middle was where the heating elements for all of it was. And other than that, the whole camp, it was run by Caucasians. And that was the administration area, which was near the front gate. And there the offices were where most of the internees were secretaries and whatnot in the offices, but the administrative area, where most of them were Caucasians that I knew of.
What was it like going from being in like foster homes to being with your dad in the camp?
It was unusual. We couldn't get used to it at first. But we knew why we were living with him, because we were told that eventually we were going to be moved, but we didn't know where. But no, it was strange. It was strange.
And how many stuff can you bring to the camp, or do you have to throw
One
away?
suitcase per person. And the children had to wear these tags that we had to put on our coats. You know, it was hung by string. It had the family number, you know,
Oh,
things like that, yeah.
it's
Yeah. In fact,
kind of.
there's this book there. I took them out. I thought you might be interested in looking at. It shows some of the tags that we had to wear.
That's not unlike what they did to.
Do you want to hold that up to the camera real quick?
Is it in?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so, tags.
And then there's another book of our camp. Now, I don't know if all of the camps had their the blocks pictures, but our camp, yeah, that's the one. Our camp, each block was photographed with the names of the people that were in that block. You want me to show you the block?
Yes.
Oh,
we were
yeah.
in?
Yes.
We were in block 6, mainly because we were first in block 22, and then my grandfather took sick. So he had to have special menu. He couldn't eat food from the mess hall, so we had to move to block 6, which was right across the street from the hospital. So every day he would go to the hospital to have his meals. And of course, these were all the administrative people. But block 6,
Is the hospital in the camp?
and there were, you know, internees were doctors and nurses, and of course the head of the hospital would be Caucasian. So there were both Caucasian and internees that were either doctors or nurses. Okay, we were in block 6. Okay, this is me.
Oh.
This is my sister. This was my dad. And there's my grandpa. And this is the barrack that we were living in. And my grandpa planted all these bushes to make our...
to make it work.
You know, and these were flaming bushes, and they turned all different colors.
Oh, that's awesome.
And this is where we lived, and these 2 windows were our windows.
Oh.
And my address was 66C. So, here's the...
Were the barracks was it like a motel sort of?
No.
Well, I mean like the insides.
They were you know, at the Colorado Historical Building, there is actually shows a barrack, a room, where it showed the actual room. It wasn't exactly the one.
Yeah.
Because Pot Belly that they showed there was really small. The one that we had in our room was big, and it was on a little platform. And you had to put coal in there to keep our room warm. But it was, like I say, the winters were cold, and the summers, the
Just
wind would blow,
miserable.
and that dust would come in through the floor and the walls. And I remember my grandpa, he used to get some milk and let it rot, and then he would mop the floor with it to try to seal.
Oh.
And
Oh,
it did
no.
help. Yeah, you know how that would be.
Yeah.
But it did help some. And it also gave a shine to the floor.
You know, the little things.
Yeah, but yeah, that's anything to try to keep the dust up, because otherwise your personal belongings were just covered in dust. You know, fine sand.
So I can imagine they were really low quality. You just
Yeah, with tar paper on the back. Well, you could see from the camp that book, that the building on the exterior were covered with tar paper.
Could you give us a description of what your housing was like? Like what were the rooms?
When you first enter it, it's just a square room, and with a little closet, built-in closet. Of course, Dad, you know, I think some of these mail order books made a lot of money. Sears and Roebuck, but because we used to order a lot from these catalogs, and so my dad had ordered draperies, so to separate the bedroom area, and so we'd have a little privacy. And when we went through the exhibit at the historical building, it even showed a little chamber pot. I don't even know if you know what that is.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. It's fun.
Yeah, yeah. We had to use those that night because you know, we didn't want to go out, especially in the winter.
Yeah.
But families just tried to make it as homey as they possibly could with what they had and what they could order from the catalogs, like Montgomery Wards, and why I think they really made a lot of money from all the camps, because I'm sure many of us ordered from them.
Yeah.
That's interesting that they gave you mail order catalogs to.
Well, I don't know if they gave it to us. I don't know.
Oh, did you have to buy them?
Yeah, I think we did. I don't know how in the world it started, but it got to the point where everyone that I knew of ordered from these catalogs. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to get what we were able to buy for, because even my dad, they didn't pay a lot of money for the work they were doing. I don't even know how much my dad was making as a storekeeper, but what money we had, you know, we would order through the catalog.
What was the eating situation like?
It was a mess hall.
Yeah.
If you could picture, like in the army, everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, and each block, in order to call everybody that it's time to eat breakfast and lunch and dinner, each block had their gong. You know, I don't know where they picked up these metal things, but they would hang it out in front, and then when it was time to eat, they would just bang that, and you could hear different sounds all over when it was time to eat. And so we had, it was pretty good until the end of the camp, you know, when everybody was leaving. But the food wasn't bad, but the family structure, I don't know if I mentioned that, but the family structure was nil. Children ate with their friends. Parents ate with their friends. So we, in fact, I don't even remember ever eating with my dad or grandpa. We always ate with our friends. So the family structure was just completely destroyed.
Wow.
So when we got out of camp and eating with my dad, you know, the first few was unusual for us.
I bet, because you mentioned that you hadn't lived with him before. So. What was life like? How did the camp influence life after giving up?
Well,
I mean, you know, no big deal.
well, we treasured freedom. I mean, behind barbed wire and guards. The only, I don't know if you'd recall, you know, some of these war movies where the soldiers always tend to give children candies and give them attention. Well, that was the way it was with us. Even in Puyallup, in the assembly centers, when we didn't have a canteen, we would talk, you know, we kids would talk to these guards, and then a couple of these guards said, do you like ice cream? And we said, oh yeah, but we can't have any because we don't have a place to buy it. So they would say, well, you meet us here, And then there was a grocery store at the time, and so they would go over to the grocery store, and there was about, it was just my sister and myself first, and then we told our friends. So there was a few that, we told them they would come. And the first time they looked, so they had to go back to get more. I remember. But they treated us so nice. They talked to us and joked with us, of course, in the ice cream. They didn't do that with the adults. Yeah, I noticed that.
That's interesting.
Pardon me?
That's interesting.
And then when we were in Minidoka, we weren't that far from the front gate. And so we used to take walks up there, and then this, remember this one guard said, "Do you want to go outside of the gate?" And we said, "Yeah." So they said, "Well, don't go wandering off though." And then we said, "No, we won't." So they let us out. And oh, it was such a good feeling. We were on this side of the fence instead of that side.
Yeah.
And it just felt so good. So good to be outside of that fence. I'll never forget that feeling. And then even their, I guess he was a sergeant, but they didn't mind us being there. I know this one time, I guess he was a colonel. He was coming up in his Jeep, and this guard said, "Hurry up, get inside, get inside." So we ran inside, and the colonel saw us, but he pretended that he didn't. So we used to do that quite often, just to be on the other side. So the guards were nice to the kids, to the children. I don't know how they reacted to the adults, but they treated us really nice. We came here, and mainly it was because friends of my dad's wrote and said not to go to Seattle because they were being harassed and even some beaten, so not to go there. And then I don't know how Dad found out about how Governor Carr
Yeah, I read about that.
welcomed the Japanese. And so that's why we came here. And my husband Hank, he was interned in Omachi. And he and his family moved here. And he used to always tell people that there was one thing good about the war is because if it wasn't for the war, I wouldn't have met my wife. Which is true, because we would have probably still be in Seattle.
Did you? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, how is the camp decided? Like, how do people decide to which camp they're stated in?
It depended on where you lived, and it wasn't the people that decided. It was the Army and the government decided who was to go where. So we didn't have a choice. So there were, 10 camps. So.
And I heard there's levels of camps, and there's one of the worst camps you guys talked about at the Day of Remembrance. So.
Oh, Tule Lake, you mean?
Yes.
I remember when Tule Lake was closed, we received several inmates from Tule Lake that came to I guess they were put in different camps when Tule Lake was closed after all the problems. So there were quite a few that came to our camp. And I found out later, of course, that they were put into other camps too.
After the internment, when Reagan signed the formal apology, what, was your reaction, or people that you knew that had similar experiences?
The one that I remember is because she was my mother-in-law, Hank's mother, and of course Otosa, Hank's father, had already passed away. And when she received the check, Hank's sister said that she took the check, put it up here, and started to cry. And said that she regretted that, Tosan wasn't here to share it. But I just, when we received ours, I don't know, my feelings were, I was glad that the apologies was said. I was glad of that. But it, like Hank used to say, I just hope it won't happen again. And it was sad, but of course people that had lost their business, it didn't cover,
Oh no.
not even a third or a fourth of what they lost. But it was something, I guess, and we appreciate it. And of course, I think we all appreciated the apology more. At least Hank and I did.
Yeah.
What was it like when you first heard about 9/11? I mean, besides because it is a tragedy.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Oh, it was unbelievable. I think everybody felt it was so unbelievable that we were actually attacked like that. I remember Hank was saying, what will happen now? And of course, after that, the Muslims, they were being harassed. And it was just like it was starting all over again, except it wasn't us, it was the Muslims. And Hank was saying, don't they ever learn that it's not all one group of people that were doing all these. Because we weren't, in fact it was proven after the war, and history would prove it, that there were no Japanese Americans that were spies. There weren't. And I'm sure it's the same with all that's going on here. You can't group one group of people and say they're all spies. I mean, that's wrong. But with our case, it was prejudice, because as you probably know, the Germans and the Italians weren't incarcerated as a group. So a lot of our incarceration was prejudice.
do you think it would have been different if there had been like a similar Pearl Harbor except with Germans or Italians?
I really don't know. I really don't know. Like Hank would mention to me once, he said, you know, if it was the Italians, would they have put Joe DiMaggio in camp?
Yeah.
You know? Several jobs that the attorneys made a living at. You know, they didn't pay them that well, but there were quite a few that were. And we had a pig farm. Oh. When the wind changed, we knew we had a pig farm. Oh. Oh. And then, of course, they had, I guess these were some of the farmers that grew their own. To give, I guess the mess halls were able to have some of the vegetables that were grown there.
The farmer's land, do they need to buy it or is it free to use?
Like when you were in the camp.
Oh, I don't really know. I think, you know, a lot of it was government owned. But then in Grenada, you know, I guess there were some problems as to having the camp there because some of the farmers owned some of that land, and they weren't too happy about the camps being there. But I guess it depends on the location as to how it was done.
Like, what kind of jobs are provided in the camps?
Well, police, I know there were policemen, and there were truck drivers. Of course, there were cooks. Each block had their own cooks. So there were cooks. They were paid. My dad was being paid. Let's see. I don't even know if the managers. I call them managers of each block, whether they were paid. Maybe they were. I'm not sure. But they were menial jobs. A lot of them were menial jobs, but important to keep their camps running. So, of course, the teachers. Now, the teachers that came, the Caucasian teachers that came from out of camp, they were paid much more than those that were internees that were teaching. So, so there were teachers, and of course the doctors and nurses. I'm sure they were paid. Probably those that were managing, like our sanitary buildings. I'm sure they were paid. And of course the secretaries and those that worked in the offices for the administration, they were paid. But I couldn't tell you how much. I know it wasn't very much, though.
What was your experience in school at the camps?
But they were very good schools. Like I said before, some of the Caucasian teachers that taught high school, some of them were actual professors from colleges and universities. And the internees that were teaching, they were teachers before the camps. Of course, they were paid. So when we came out of camp, we went to a private church school. And they didn't, we had to take entry tests. They didn't hold us back. And we knew that we were from good schools because we were told that competing with the schools out of camp, we were either even or above. So I knew that the schools that we were going to there in camp were good.
And then I think you had mentioned it. It was either you or one of the other women. After camp, you were able to, or were you able to go to college and like?
Well, for me personally, no, I didn't.
Oh, then
I had, I had to work. I had to work because only Dad was working, so I had to work. And then I graduated in 50, and then I was married in 53, 1953.
Did you ever, like, after getting out of the camp and going back to Seattle, like, during your visits, did you face any other prejudice or discrimination?
No. Let's see, the first time I went back, actually, was in 1951. When my grandfather wanted me to come and to start taking care of him. I left here. Let's see, Hank went to Cincinnati, Ohio after he graduated for his first job with GE in 51 when he graduated DU. So I left the day after he left. I went to Seattle. I only stayed through until September. Mainly because of what was going on with my family. I mean, divorce during their day, my mom and dad's day, was non-existent. And they were the first to get divorced. No one forgot about it. And when I went back and I saw my mom for the first time, my cousin arranged it. We went to a Japanese picnic. And I don't know who, somebody told my grandpa, very angry. And he in turn told my dad. He was very angry. And so I just said, I'm going back to Denver. So that's why in September I returned to Denver. But after Hank and I were married, we became much closer to my mom. She used to come and visit us, and then when our daughter passed away, she came to help me emotionally, help Hank. So we did become much closer, which was great. I think that pull, you know,
Yeah.
especially mother-daughter, I think
Oh yeah.
that pull is there. So but my mom used to come and visit, and then she remarried, and I have a half-sister, Colleen. And so Colleen would come and visit, and until my mom was becoming, she must have been in her late 70s, early 80s, when she, of course, didn't want to travel anymore. Mm-hmm. So Hank was working for Martin Marietta at the time, and he would travel a lot, so I used to go visit my mom and other relatives twice a year because of the mileage. Mm-hmm. Mileage club years. So I used to go twice a year to Seattle to visit